Well, I guess it's a good thing that Junior Caminero had his passport updated. When
Ouch, babe. Nah.
A little bit. A little shot there. What the heck, man? We'll get to the Rays' 11-9 win over the Toronto Blue Jays in scintillating fashion as Junior Caminero goes yard with the granny when they really needed it after blowing several leads in this game.
By the way, that ball man needed a passport to get back to America where he hit it.
Man, that thing, yeah, I had a damn stewardess on it, don't you think? But yeah, Yandy Diaz. Okay, something went wrong, right, with the passport. I don't know exactly what, but I guess my bigger problem with it or question would be like every year, you need an updated one to get to Canada, and they are in the division, and we're not. This isn't the first series of the year. It's like, who discovered that there was an issue here, and when did they discover it? Because typically, they've been playing for what 6-7 weeks now.
Well, the passports are good for what 10 years, right?
Yeah, 10 years for adults, 5 years for kids, right?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe just didn't realize 10 years ago is when he got the passport. I mean, I don't know when it expired.
Doesn't the Rays check all that stuff though in the beginning of the year?
Like, I would think that's part of the protocols.
Your traveling
with
secretary
everything.
goes, "Hey, bring all your passports so we have them."
I would think so, but
I'm not getting on any particular person over there. I really don't know what happened. It's just weird that your El Capitan, if you had one, or one of your veteran players that you rely on, one of your better hitters, can't make it to Canada this late into the season. Like I said, it's not the first series, and God knows there's enough international strife out there that you want to make sure your passport is updated. So not only do you get out of the country, but you get back in these days. Who the hell knows? You could end up in a prison someplace. But it was just, you definitely want all your hands on deck for this thing. But the Rays came out swinging the bats, man, 11 runs.
Well,
which
it's a
is
good thing because they
phenomenal.
needed 10 of those 11 runs.
Yeah, exactly. Aranda had a 2-run home run. I think the Blue Jays may have hit 4. So it was a seesaw game. Not so good though with the bullpen. No bueno there. They could not iron it down. And as a matter of fact, the Blue Jays had a 1-run lead going into the 9th inning.
Well, yeah, so they take the lead in the bottom of the 8th. Varsho with a 3-run shot.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and he crushed that thing.
Oh, he did. So it's 7-6. The Blue Jays get their first lead of the game.
Yeah.
Did you think the Rays were going to come back in that?
No,
because I didn't.
Heck no. I thought you've blown. They had a 4-0 lead. They blew that. Then I think they were up like 6-4, 7-4. They blew that. So yeah, after the the bomb by Varsho, his second of the game, I'm like, yeah, this ain't working out for you guys tonight. And Fairbanks wasn't that good. Varsho drove in 4. He went 2 for 5. So it just didn't feel like, as they like to say, it just wasn't going to work for us tonight. But man, credit the Rays. They kept after it and kept getting guys on, and they took out, the Blue Jays closer, to be honest with you. So, and then, Caminero doing Caminero thing. Like, that's what you want from this kid, right? Like, that's that superstar big moment bat with unlimited power, that thrives in a big moment. And man, he got into one. He got into one when they needed it with a grand slam. So
yeah, they hung that off-speed pitch inside, and he turned on it, man.
Yeah, it just a cement mixer on the inside part of the plate, and he got underneath it, and man, he just rode it into the upper deck. So
I was watching it with my 9-year-old son, and I'm like, he doesn't need a home run. Just put the bat on the ball.
That's right.
Base hit. That's what I'm telling him. Except they hung it, and then he turned, and it was like, okay.
They don't miss mistakes in the big leagues. They just don't miss them. Like maybe in minor league baseball, you get away with that, and guy hits one off the wall or something. But man, you get to the show and you throw one up in that area, and they do not miss many mistakes. So Hoffman was just, their closer just was off, not very good, and the Rays were patient with him. Even Caminero, took a whole bunch of pitches against him before he.
But he got down to 0-2, then he started battling back. So
yeah, he came back and then hung the inside slider.
And then the Rays closer wasn't very good. So Pete Fairbanks had to be taken out. Mason
struggled.
Montgomery had to finish it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Fairbanks had to go out, and so they got Montgomery in there, and he got it done. So big win for the Rays. A chance to continue to build off their series win against Milwaukee, and we'll see where they go. But
Well, the Red Sox got walked off in the 11th inning.
did they?
So now they're only a game and a half behind the Red Sox for second place in the division.
What? Wow, that's something. The
And a
Yankees are
game behind
playing out
Toronto.
west in Seattle. They're in the third. There's no score as we do this podcast. We'll keep you updated. But yeah, so I mean, you got to get around 500 again. You got to get back there, and they've actually played pretty well on the road, especially of late. And it's just Steinbrenner's giving a little bit of trouble. But anytime you can get 11 runs on the board near the Rays and get 10 hits on top of that, that's really good. And Toronto is scuffling along. They're not playing very well, not pitching particularly well. So this is an opportunity for them to win a series. And
they had won, I think, 4 in a row coming into that game.
They were hot, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They had a little mini streak there, but Rays shut them down as far as seesaw affair goes. That was not the biggest baseball story, however, of the day. Not at all. Not even close. Even as well as the Rays played. We'll get to that in just a second. I want to remind you guys, go see our friends at Breitling Boutique. Where are they? International Plaza Mall. Glad you asked. It's the Breitling Company, which has been in business now for over 140 years, one of the best Swiss watchmakers in the world, and have been for over a century. And they've been at International Plaza Mall for about 5 years or so. They have a whole assortment of some of the greatest timepieces you will ever see or attempt to buy. We're talking the men's watches, the chronomats, the Navatimers, women's watches, lots of sports watches. These things are durable. If your wife or girlfriend is on the go, she's going to love the way this looks, and it's going to hold up. All kinds of different colored wristbands for her to choose from. And it is Breitling Boutique. Right now, they're running a kind of a deal where the NFL is celebrating their 104th year anniversary. There are 32 teams in the NFL and 32 team watches while supplies last. These are chronomat. These are men's watches. They have each team has its, of course, the team colors as the face of the watch, and then the team logo. These things are absolutely beautiful, but it's while supplies last. It's Breitling Boutique. They're an International Plaza Mall. You're going to love the customer service. Make sure you tell them when you get there that you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. Well, when you never have anything to talk about, say, like in talk radio, whatever, you go, should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame? Go. Sure you did that a few times in Cincinnati, right?
Oh, that was topic A every day, all the time, no matter what. Like,
guaranteed to light up the phones. I mean, guaranteed, especially in Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
But and I got an idea which way they leaned. No, but this has been a debate, and of course, Pete bet on baseball, and he's deceased now, and he did not get into into Cooperstown because, frankly, he was banned from baseball, and has been for some time. Well, not so fast, my friend, as Lee Corso would say. Major League Baseball is making some changes, I would say. And Pete Rose and guys like Shoeless Joe Jackson from the Black Sox and other Black Sox former players, they're now eligible to be voted for the Hall of Fame after Rob Manfred removed them from Major League Baseball's permanently ineligible list. That's what they were on.
So we'll see what the Hall of Fame does now.
That's right.
So the Hall of Fame is not part of baseball. It's a separate entity.
That's right.
They have their own rules, their own this. The year before Pete Rose became eligible for the Hall of Fame, they changed the rule for the Hall of Fame and said, if you were banned from baseball, you're not eligible for the Hall of Fame. Period. Until then, you were eligible.
Yeah.
Shoeless Joe Jackson could have been inducted in the Hall of Fame when he retired a long time ago, of course.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't, but he was eligible.
Right.
Pete Rose was never eligible to be on the ballot.
That's right.
And the Hall of Fame changed that rule the year before Pete became eligible.
Mm-hmm.
Much to Don Sutton's chagrin, which he and I got in a debate one night about that.
I've heard that story. Oh, man. Well, so now there's this decision to remove the deceased individuals from the permanently ineligible list, allowing them to at least be candidates for the Hall of Fame. So all those individuals, and it's more than just Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe, that have been reinstated now, that had been permanently ineligible due to whether it's gambling or throwing games or whatever. They're now able to be considered. And look, a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, believe that Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame, should have always been in the Hall of Fame. He bet on baseball, but he bet not against his team. He was managing the Reds at that time. He did his penance, and he's the hit king, over 4,100 something hits. Like, all of this was just, too much. He's a Hall of Famer, and you'll hear the arguments. Well, it's a museum. Make a notation on his plaque. There's a lot of things they could have done, but it was clear during his life, and certainly now that he has passed, that Pete Rose was never going to stand on those steps in Cooperstown. They were not going to allow that to happen. And in as much now as he's eligible, we have to still see what the baseball writers believe and what they will do with people like Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson, who had gambling against them. I've never been particularly upset that he wasn't in the Hall of Fame. And listen, when I grew up, I think I've said this, my dad was a scout for the Cincinnati Reds. The Big Red Machine in my house was about as important as it got, and later on after that, they signed some players from here that my dad coached, Tom Hume, the reliever, and Ben Hayes, and some of these guys from St. Petersburg. So in our house, the Reds were kind of the thing. And of course they trained in Tampa. I think my sister would go to like the dog track. You'd always see Pete Rose there, during spring training and stuff. So I grew up right with all the Reds, and I was very aware of that era and what he meant, not just to them, but also to baseball moving forward. And then he managed, and he was a player managed for a while, and then he managed, and as history shows us, that he did bet on baseball while he was managing, but he claims, and I don't think it's been necessarily disproven, that he never bet against his team to win, which is reassuring if it can be proven. But nonetheless, that was his sin. I don't have a problem with not putting Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame. I never have. I mean, do I think he's a Hall of Famer? Yeah, by definition, he was has the most hits in baseball history, and he has the World Series rings, and he was Charlie Hustle, and on and on and on. And I guess it comes down to, well, what's the Hall of Fame anyway? It's not a Major League Baseball product. It's just a museum. Blah blah blah. Make a notation, and I get it. I get all of that. But the integrity of the game is the integrity of the game. And it doesn't matter to me. Maybe it minimizes it a little bit, that whether he bet against or for the Rays. The fact of the matter is, the guy gambled on baseball. He committed the cardinal sin of any sport.
Well, the argument of I only bet for the Reds to win was you didn't bet every day.
That's right. So you could have held back your closer or your bullpen and said, you know what, I'm not betting on him tonight because we're kind of stretched out. Our guys had too many innings, so this is not a game that I'm going to go all out to win. If we got a 1-run lead in the ninth, I'm not going to burn up my best closer. But tomorrow night, I got all my guys. I'm going to bet on him that night. So, yeah, you could absolutely affect the outcome in that sense.
You can. Now, I completely disagree with you. He absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
But I have no problem with him being banned from baseball, and he should have never worked in baseball again.
Yeah, that's fair.
Some people don't think he should be banned. I absolutely think he should. Like, the integrity of the game.
Yeah.
The ban from baseball was fine.
Right.
Not being able to work in baseball again, I completely agree with.
Okay.
100%. But the Hall of Fame is a museum. Someone got 4,256 hits.
Right.
A record that may never be broken.
Right.
Somebody got it. How are they not in the Hall of Fame? That is ridiculous.
Well, yeah, and I've heard that argument.
How is Barry Bonds not in the Hall of Fame? And by the way, never tested positive for steroids.
Because his hat size went up about 3/4.
I'm not saying he didn't do them. I'm saying that baseball turned a blind eye for a generation.
They
didn't care until Congress said, hey, we're going to look at your antitrust exemption. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So they didn't care. They chose to do nothing. Everyone knew what was going on in baseball.
Yeah.
The players knew, the GMs knew, the owners knew, everybody knew. They were all making
So have
money
a
off
wing that says the steroid era.
No, well, I mean, if you want to, okay. But like I said, there are players that did test positive,
There were.
but if you want to put an asterisk by it, fine. But like those players deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. They should be. It's a museum. Are we trying to rewrite history?
Well, but it is a museum, and you could certainly document that these guys were caught cheating, or in the case of some of them not caught cheating, I suppose, and still put them in there.
Sure, I'm okay with that.
But I know you are. But I would submit to you that, like, if it cost them the Hall of Fame, good. You cheated. You committed the cardinal sin, the only sin that's integrity of any sport, which is, in every clubhouse, in every locker room that I've ever walked into, it's the first rule. You cannot gamble. You cannot bet on your sport, and you can't. And look, I think it's going to be a problem going forward because now these kids can do this on their phones and it's on everywhere, and they don't think anything of it. But like, to me, there's a hell of a lot of guys that were good too that didn't do it. And, the few bad apples, do we know that Pete Rose is the hit king and that he's absolutely one of the greatest baseball players of all time? Yeah. I don't owe him a plaque in Cooperstown. I don't. And you know what? The history books are full of rogue people that don't get rewarded in life because of the mistakes they make.
But you've also got cheaters in the Hall of Fame.
More
guys
than
who did spitballs and scuffing balls, and they're in the Hall of Fame.
They didn't get caught while they were before they got inducted, did they?
The Negroes, of course, they got caught along the way.
I think. Listen, we're splitting hairs now. You talk about loading up baseballs, scuffing baseballs.
I'm not saying
that sort of thing versus versus like trying to bet on who is going to win the game or not.
I'm not comparing it to that, but what I'm saying is, but at some point you got to draw a line. A cheater's a cheater, right?
I drew it at gambling.
Okay, but you said Barry Bonds should be in the Hall.
Steroids.
Well, okay, and what else?
Whatever else I deem to be cheating, I guess. No, seriously. And personally, I don't have as big a problem like with guys like Clemens and Bonds. Like, I would make exceptions only for the guys that I knew were Hall of Famers before they juiced. And that's kind of a slippery slope, right? But I think Barry Bonds was one of the best players in baseball, was on his way to being in the Hall of Fame even before he decided to hit 7 home runs, And so, like, I know what my eyes see personally. Not everybody's like that, but I do. I know that Roger Clemens is a Hall of Famer. We can debate Rafael Palmeiro and some of these ancillary guys, but at the end of the day, they were some of the greatest players. But you know what? You didn't need to do it. And the everybody did it excuse. All right. Well, no, not everybody did.
But I would venture to bet more did it than you think, and there's probably someone in the Hall of Fame from that era that did.
I would agree with that. Like,
that's the whole thing is those that got busted for it, okay.
Yeah.
Now you've got an argument. Those who weren't busted, because baseball didn't care. No one in the game did. Owners, GMs, they didn't care that steroids was going on. Nobody tried to stop it or do anything about it.
That's true.
They were all making a ton of money off of it and said it's fine. And don't tell me the integrity of the game when nobody of that era did anything about it. It wasn't until Congress said, oh, we're going to look at your antitrust exemption. Oh, well, now we care.
Yeah.
That's the
I have
reason.
less trouble with that than I do the gambling, but I still don't think, see the whole notion that everybody did it. That's where I kind of fall down.
The true answer is
I promise you, we don't know who did and didn't.
No.
And probably you're right. A preponderance of guys, there are guys in the Hall of Fame that did probably juice and did those things. But I also think about the guy that got stuck in AAA because he was a second baseman and he couldn't hit 30 home runs, and the guy in front of him was juicing and did.
Mm-hmm.
Like there should be some, not punishment necessarily, but accountability somewhere. Even if baseball turned its blind eye, you still made the choice to stick that needle in your butt or whatever you did. And if you made your money, God bless you, Alex Rodriguez and others. But that doesn't mean I got to put you in a museum or whatever. Where the place where we consider hallowed ground.
But
You know,
once again, and granted, do I believe Barry Bonds did steroid? Absolutely. But he never tested
no
positive.
proof of it.
When they started testing, he didn't test positive. Now,
right.
we all know there's ways around it because we've seen it in every
But
sport.
there were
from
investigations.
track and field to everything else.
There was the Balco. His name appeared on a lot of those.
Sure.
I mean, there was circumstantial evidence. It was, it's not a court of law per se, but I think there was enough circumstantial evidence to reasonably deduct or deduce that he was a steroid user or performance enhancing drug user. And I know what I see. I kind of know what I see, but you're right. There's no due process is what you're getting at. Like there's, nobody found him guilty of steroids, and there's players that are going to be kept out of Hall of Fame, and nobody technically said, I have the proof and here it is, but I guess I'm just not as crazy. And listen, like I said, in my family, Pete Rose, they're Big Red Machine fans all through my family, but he was also kind of a smarmy character. I mean, you can't indict a guy for that. There's lots of those guys,
all the
right?
sports,
Ty Cobb, and
yeah.
But at the end of the day, I guess maybe I'm insensitive. My heart doesn't bleed. Like you did this to yourself. Whatever it is that you're being kept out for, it was a decision you made, right? It wasn't like somebody said, I don't like the color of your hair and we're not going to put you in, or your bat, was, somebody handed you was illegal one time. No, you consciously, broke the rules of baseball, whatever they were, and they were pretty clearly stated at the time. So I guess I'm not emotional that way. Believe me, I watched Pete Rose, and in my era, everybody dove into the bases head 1st and started doing that because of Pete Rose. I had teammates on my Legion team. One guy thought he was Pete Rose. He wore number 14, and when he would walk, he would sprint at full speed to first base because he so desperately wanted to emulate Pete Rose. But take the good with the bad. I mean, like Pete went too far. He went too far, and he got caught. And the other thing about it is too, Steve, I never thought he was contrite about it. Like,
well, that's been a big part of this. So
yeah,
when he accepted the lifetime ban, there's always been, I don't want to say conspiracy, but there's always been thoughts of there was some type of agreement between him and Bart Giamatti.
It was a deal, yeah.
A deal of take this ban and in a year or two or whatever, we'll reinstate you, etc.
Yeah. Just stay out of baseball. You can't be employed by baseball.
Right. Yeah. There was probably, there's always been talk of that. Now, Bart Giamatti died 6 days later.
That's weird. I know that could have changed history right there, right?
And so, Pete took the deal. The other part of this is, and it's usually the case, whether it's Al Capone or anybody else, took the deal because the IRS was after him.
That's exactly right.
And he kind of had to because he was in trouble because of all these gambling expenses, money, debt, etc., that he wasn't paying his taxes for.
Right. Somebody's going to collect.
Yeah. Usually it's the IRS that gets those guys, not what they did in law enforcement. But, so it's hard to tell. I mean, whether there was a deal, whether it was a wink, wink, obviously nothing in writing, etc. But then Giamatti dies.
Right.
Fay Vincent takes over. And he's very anti-Rose in the Hall. And Rose and being in baseball.
Exactly.
And we've been in that scenario ever since until today when Rob Manfred then lifted that, banning of baseball for those that are deceased.
Yeah. In so doing, said essentially that, well, they can't bring a scourge to the game now because they're dead. And so, we'll consider them, but we weren't going to put them in while they were alive because they, what they represented. They're still that same kind of player / person. Yeah. So I don't know what's changed. I do think the political climate we live in, though, is a factor. I know that Manfred was, at the White House, and Trump has been advocating that Pete Rose and others go into the Hall of Fame, and that's kind of the times we live in now. It's like becoming
Yep.
more tolerant in some respects and whatnot. But
the other part of this is if he's part of baseball now and back in, or can be, baseball could make money off him.
They could.
They put him in the hall and merchandise and everything else. And
geez, yeah.
Let's not forget that part of it too.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a lot they could do to monetize him and others, and there will be others. Still one of my favorite movies, man, is Field of Dreams with Shoeless Joe Jackson and the Black Sox scandal. You read about that. That thing's unbelievable, right? That they essentially had a bunch of players willing to throw the World Series.
Yep.
But
the World Series not meaning what it does today. Back
no.
then it wasn't what it was, and the players didn't make the money they make either.
Exactly. Yeah, there wasn't as much at stake, and the fans were only so engaged. But it was their championship, I guess. There's been movies made about it, and not just that one, but others. So that's really something, And there's other players too. Like I didn't realize I have to look up all their stories, but there is a good number of players that for one reason or another have, kind of lived under this lifetime ban that we might find out about. But yeah, you kind of saw it coming, and now that it's here, I wonder, it's not a guarantee, right? It's not a guarantee that whatever committee has to vote on this, that they're just going to, plug them right through. Like, I don't know what will happen. I suspect they'll be in, but I don't know that. And then it'll be up to their survivors to stand up there and give the speech and talk about how awful it is that they, put him in posthumously, and Pete Rose, what he meant to the game and all of that. He was a character, though. Man, he was a character. On and off the diamond, he was something else. And a likable guy from the style of play, just how hard he played, And there are others, too, that are in that same boat. So I don't think it'll happen right away. We'll see what the process is. But, yeah. And then, there's a human element. It's like, really? You had to wait for the guy to die, and now you're going to clear him? Yeah, that's how it worked. It's kind of how it worked, you were going to pay the price for your decisions, and while you were on this earth, they weren't going to reward you that way. So, kind of shocking to see it, like that. And then you wonder, okay, so let's talk about Barry Bonds, or let's talk about Roger Clemens, and some of those other guys, and different offenses, probably, certainly not necessarily gambling, but doesn't that kind of fall into the same?
But all those guys were on the ballot.
They have been on the ballot. Yeah, that's
Pete
correct.
Rose has never been on the ballot.
That's correct. He was banned. He was ineligible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the Hall of Fame, like I said, changed that rule.
Right.
The year before he was eligible to be on the ballot.
Right. Now, do you think that it's going to be fait accompli that, like, oh, okay, well then,
Well, it's going to have to be to the senior committee or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
It's not on the main ballot because you're only on there for 10 years.
For 10, yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was, thought of Barry Bonds should sign a one-day contract, play a game, and reset the clock to go back, in 5 years. But because he's past that 10-year mark now too.
Right.
Or now it's the senior committee. Whenever that, that's where Pete Rose would have to go. So I don't know I don't know enough to who's on the committee and how they do it, but.
Mm-hmm. No, it's totally fascinating, and everybody will say and have said, "What a shame." You wait till the man dies, and then you give him what he wanted the most in life. And yeah, I get all that. That tugs at my heartstrings too. But I always go back to what kind of society are we going to live in? People have to be held accountable. And, maybe they're evolving in some respects to this, to the Hall of Fame and whatnot. But it will be a slippery slope to see, what they're willing to accept next, if anything. But yeah, man, these you always do these Pete Rose stories. Hey, should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame? I got nothing to talk about. Go. But this time, it was a legit story, and it's being talked about everywhere, in the sports world at least. Hey, the schedule drops tonight, 8 p.m. Be there or be square.
Speaking of someone that was in the Hall, then taken out, now going back in.
The Ring of Honor, you mean?
I believe we called this last night.
You did call this last night. You did. And I think that the Buccaneers social media team, as they only can do, listens to Sports Day Tampa Bay.
Of course they do.
Show Prep Tampa Bay. And, what's great about the schedule release is that all 32 teams have these social media teams that are just so creative and so clever about how they release the schedule through graphics and design and frankly, bits, right? Gimmicks and stuff like that. And you mentioned, I think, Gruden opening boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, there's a tease on the Bucs website. It's Gruden. We think he's outside the FFCA, man. Look at the size of this box. 50th anniversary, man. And he can barely pick it up and waddles it inside. And don't you know that tonight, when the Bucs are ready to release the schedule and the league starts to release it around 8 a.m., there'll be a video.
8
p.m.
And
it'll be
8 p.m., not 8
8 p.m. Did I say a.m.? Wow. Feels like 8 a.m. 8 p.m. And there'll be a video of him, pulling out the order of games, I would imagine. Carolina Panthers, man.
He only does that one on this
see,
podcast.
That's true. Yeah, he does that. We're going to see Dave Canales week 1, man. They're seeing some leaks out there. I don't know if they're true or not, but one had him going to Carolina at 1 o'clock in the first week. Not sure exactly how anything else will fall, or even that one for that matter. But there is some leakage out there that may or may not be true. Of course, they play at Detroit. Have to see if that's going to be a Thanksgiving game or not. I've seen Monday Night Football against the Jets at home in week 2. Don't know if that's true. So we're going to have to wait just a few more hours and check it out on TampaBay.com and then the Tampa Bay Times. I will spit it out this, pretty close to when I find it. These schedules will turn up at some point. And then, of course, the big release is at 8 p.m. And it's an interesting schedule regardless of the order. You still have a couple of West Coast trips to the Rams, for example, all the way to Seattle to play the Seahawks. That's going to be one of the longest trips in the NFL. So it's, that part's always kind of fun to see where you're going to be in the fall.
Doesn't look like the Bucs are getting an international game.
No, there's one left, maybe one to be determined.
So the Chargers' opponent in Brazil for opening week.
Brazil.
That'll be announced today.
Man, that would be fun.
But all the other international games have been announced. The Vikings on the road for 2 straight international games, Dublin and England.
That's crazy. Like, that's an organizational decision. That's Ziggy Wilfs or whoever is running the team over there saying, yeah, it's okay if we go over for 2 weeks.
We'll take a paid vacation to England.
I know, but what? Like that, man, that is so hard to do as a player, and you can't really turn them loose like it's a Pro Bowl over there. Long time away from your family and friends and across the pond and all that. So, you can see the Jags doing it because, frankly, they're the Jags and they're going to be redoing their stadium soon. They got a lot of things going on, but this is sort of in the course. I always thought that if there was going to be a team in Europe, it would in fact be the Jaguars, and that they would keep their training facility here in Jacksonville when they come back to play sort of road games and things. But always a fun day. It's a fun day because not only can you determine your team's record, give or take, but you can envision like, okay, on this date, I'm going to be in this city. I'm going to be traveling here. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be, and they got obviously some trips out west that they're going to have to address at some point. Yeah. And, see where the bye week is. Like, there's so much you can glean from the schedule release. It's one of my favorite days in the NFL. I really do enjoy it.
Not only that, but we're getting some college times too for week 0.
Oh, yeah?
Week 1.
I think I saw where USF has playing Boise.
Yeah, they're playing the Thursday night before Labor Day weekend. Boise State, 5:30 p.m. kickoff at Raymond James Stadium.
Wow.
USF's got a tough schedule. They open with Boise State at home.
Yeah.
Then they go to Florida and to Miami.
Woof. Those are tough. Try to win one of those games, you might have a chance. That's your state power right there. There's your state championship to begin the season with.
Florida State hosts Alabama week 1, August 30th. That's
Alabama.
a 3:30 kickoff. So
one of those kickoff matchups on a. It's not at night though. It's on 3:30. You said.
Yeah, 3:30. Yep.
Okay.
Miami's hosting Notre Dame, and that's Sunday of Labor Day weekend at 7:30.
It's going to be great, man. I'm ready for some football, as they used to say.
Mm-hmm.
but I am. I'm tired of these practices. I'm kind of tired of guys running around in shorts. It's like, all right, I know I still got vacation left. Let's just get it over with and get back and start doing football. If nothing else, give us a lot to talk about. But yeah, it's going to be a long, hot summer, man. There's a lot of OTAs and things like that. The Bucs presented their defensive coaches, and they were available to the media on Tuesday. Charlie Strong, I thought, was interesting. Having him coached here at University of South Florida, and of course, he was an assistant down there in Miami and all of that. Boy, he knows everybody. He knows almost all the young guys on the team because from one post or another, he recruited these guys coming out of high school. So he knows all of them. But Charlie would be a good addition. And some of the other defensive coaches were over there talking about corners and safeties and where guys are going to play. It's way too early for any of that. They're still just young kids and they're going to have to learn a lot. But yeah, it's almost that time, man. It feels like you get here, the schedule's released, and then, before you know it, we're in OTAs, and then it's mandatory minicamp. Then boom, you're like 3 or 4 or 5 weeks away from the season opener, which in this case could be at Carolina, I suppose. And we'll just have to wait just a few more hours, one more sleep to kind of find out. Hey, make sure you get on down to Breitling Boutique International Plaza Mall. Go help out our sponsors. The Breitling Company has been making beautiful Swiss watches now for over 140 years. They've been in International Plaza for more than 5. They got the Navatimers, the Chronomats for the men. They got sports watches, all kinds of beautiful colors, wristbands for the wife or the girlfriend. When you go there, center of the mall, upstairs, make sure you let them all know that you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. Thanks for listening. As always, for Steve Versnick, I'm Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times. Have a great day, everybody.